everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chad, and welcome to the 6th installment in the series on JavaScript array methods you need to know as a software engineer. In this video, we're going to learn about the slice and splice methods, go over some examples, and look at some of the interesting aspects of them. Okay, let's get coding. First up is the slice method, which allows us to get a slice, or a subset, of an array as a new array based on indexes. This method is pure, meaning it does not modify the original array. The slice method takes two arguments, start index and end index, both of which are optional and can be configured in a handful of different ways. Let's look at one of the base cases. So if we call numbers.slice, pass 0 as the first argument, that's the start index, and console log that out, we get an array of 0 through 9, which is exactly equal to the original numbers array. Okay, so that's not terribly exciting. What if we pass a second argument? Let's say 1. And if we save this, now we can see the result is an array with just one item. That's 0. So when we pass both arguments, the start and end indexes, it becomes a bit easier to see how this works. Start index is the starting index, which is inclusive, where end index is the ending index and is exclusive. So in this case, we start at 0 and grab that item because start index is inclusive, move to the first index, but don't grab that because end index is exclusive. And we wind up with a result of just one item, and that's 0 in this case. And one interesting side effect of this is if you pass 0 and 0 here, we'd actually get an empty array. If we're starting at the 0 index and we're ending at the 0 index, which is exclusive, there's nothing to grab. Now, if end index isn't passed at all, like in our first example, or it exceeds the length of the array, it will be clamped to the length, and you'll get from the start index to the end of the array back. So as an example here, if we pass 13, which is clearly larger than the length of the array, saving that, we get all of the original numbers in the original numbers array. So that's the general gist of the slice method, but before we move on, I did want to mention that both arguments can actually be negative numbers, and these negative numbers will act as offsets from the end of the array. So if we change this to pass a start index of -1, and we save that, now we just see an array containing the single item 9. And that's because we started 1 away from the length of the array, which is right here, and that's inclusive, didn't pass an end index, so we grabbed that one item. Now if we were to pass -2 here, the start index would be 2 from the length of the array, which would be right here, and if we didn't pass an end index, we would wind up with 8 and 9. If we pass both start index and end index as a negative, we're still just working with offsets from the end. So if we passed -2 and -1, we can see we get an array with one item, 8. And again, so -2 as the start index, that's 2 from the length of the array, so that right here at 8, and that's inclusive. And -1, which is 1 from the length of the array, which would be right here, which is exclusive. And that leaves just one item, 8. All right, before we move on, I do have to say, it's not very often that I pass negative arguments to slice, and we'll see something similar with the splice method. Personally, I think it's a little bit confusing and it's a little hard to follow. Sometimes there may be good use cases. If you found one to use negative numbers here, please do let me know down in the comments. I'd like to hear it. Next up is the splice method, which modifies the items in an array by removing, replacing, and or adding new items in place. So note that this method is not pure. In other words, splice modifies the original array. This method takes one required parameter, the start index, a second optional parameter, the delete count, and n additional parameters for items to add. And splice also returns an array of the deleted items. Now we'll take a look at all the different variations of how you can invoke the splice method, but we'll start off with our numbers array again. And we'll call splice just with the start index, setting the result to the deleted variable. And we'll also add some logging to see what happened. And when we save that, we can see that the deleted array over here in the console contains all the numbers from the original array, and the numbers array is now empty. Since we passed 0 as the start index and no delete count, that's the second argument, Splice is deleting everything from the array. If we specify a delete count such as 1, and we save that, now we see the deleted array contains a single element, 0, and numbers no longer contains that element. It was moved off of the beginning of the array at the 0 index. So this delete count argument specifies the number of items we want to delete, starting with start index and going up to the length of the array. If we pass a number greater than the length of the array, or equal to it, we'll get the same result as not passing the delete count at all. So if we pass 25, which is clearly longer or larger than the length of the array, and we save that, notice that the deleted array contains all the original numbers, and the numbers array is now empty, just like our first example. Okay, what if we want to replace some items? So going back to a delete count of 1, now we can replace one element at index 0 by adding a third argument. And if we save that, notice in the console that the deleted array contains 0 because we started at the beginning of the array and removed one item, and the numbers array now starts with 10 because we've inserted it where the deleted item was. So you can see here 10 is the first item in the array. We can also pass additional arguments to insert multiple items. So here we're passing 10, 11, and 12. And after saving that, in the console we still see that 0 is in the deleted array because we start at the beginning of the array and passed a delete count of 1. But now we see 10, 11, and 12 have been inserted into the numbers array in place of that 0 item. Now up to this point, we've only removed the first item, but we can remove or replace any items in the array by modifying the start index and delete count arguments. So let's say we want to remove 5 and replace it with this 10, 11, and 12. We can do that by modifying the start index, setting that to 5, because the number 5 is in the 5th index. And after saving that, in the console, we can now see that 5 has been deleted, and 10, 11, and 12 are now in its place. If we want to replace everything from 5 to the end of the array with 10, 11, and 12, we can pass the array length to Splice as the delete count, like this. I'll make this just a little bit smaller so we can see that. So here we're passing the length of the numbers array as the delete count argument. And saving that, now we see in the console that 5 through 9 have been deleted and replaced with 10, 11, and 12. If we only want to insert new items without deleting any, we can actually pass a delete count of 0. I'll make this a little bit bigger again. And after saving that, in the console we can now see that 10, 11, and 12 have been added to the array. One thing to keep in mind is where 10, 11, and 12 are added. Notice that they're now before the number 5. The start index argument, which we passed as 5 here, always references that position in the array such that the first deleted element is at that index and the first added element is at that index. In this case, we didn't delete anything, but 10 is now at index 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5th index being 10 right here. Okay, there's one last thing to know about Splice, and that is that you can pass negative numbers as the start index argument. When passing a negative number, you're specifying an index offset from the length of the array. So if we wanted to delete the last item from the array, we can pass -1 as the start index, like so. And saving that, in the console we'll see that 9 was deleted because 9's index in the original array was length -1. Passing a negative number whose absolute value is greater than the length of the array is essentially the same as passing a start index of 0. So if we passed -25, which again is clearly bigger than the length of the array here, saving that, now we have the same result as the first example where all elements have been deleted from the numbers array. Personally, I think using a negative start index is honestly a little bit mind-bending and can be hard to follow, so I don't really use that often, but it's important to know how it works in case you do find a use case where it's helpful. If you found a use case where it's helpful, do let me know down in the comments. I'm interested to hear it. Alright everyone, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video or learned something, please hit that like button as it helps the algorithm get it in front of more users like yourself. If you're interested in other videos like this, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any uploads. And of course, if you have a request for a particular type of content, or you have questions about the content in this video, definitely leave a comment down below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.